be sitting down and talking about an amazing project that we worked with the Department of Education. And we're going to have a guest speaker, Leslie Lloyd. And Leslie is actually trying to get connected as we speak. And for any of you that are in the meeting today, you will know if you work for a government agency, and it doesn't matter if it's a military or any type of government agency, firewalls are strong, and things are very hard to get back and forth as far as communication. So Leslie's going to do everything that he can to get in. But what we're actually going to be doing today is talking a lot about a very, very cool topic. For us, we actually worked with the Department of Education here at Designing Digitally to develop out a critical thinking, mobile responsive, mobile phone first developed learning experience. And so one of the things that I do want to start off with and talk about something that I feel very much something that is very important to me, at least, is the difference between mobile compatible and mobile friendly. And I don't know how many of you guys see that, but I would love for us to kind of define that right now. And the reason why is we find that mobile friendly and mobile compatible really in the realm of web development and mobile app development, it's much different. So let's talk about that for a second. Mobile friendly means that it will work on a phone, it will work on a tablet, but it may not work perfectly. It's friendly to those devices. It's friendly across the board. It may work and you may be able to interact with it, but it may not in any way, shape, or form be absolutely perfect in the design, the look and feel, and the interactivity. Okay. So your mobile friendly is a lot of the outputs that we see with build it once and export it all, and what we end up doing is finding that there may be things that don't work and may work a little differently than they're supposed to with mobile friendly. With mobile compatible, in our actual definition here at Designing Digitally, that's something to where we know tried and true that it is accepting and acknowledging a particular system and the way that it needs to work for that system, and then not necessarily adapting to it, because we're not talking about responsive and adaptive, but what we're talking about is it's working flawlessly across the board and has been exhaustively tested across the board to ensure compatibility on each one of the required devices. So there's a big difference between mobile friendly and mobile compatible. And so that's the first thing that I want to define. And for anybody that has ever had discussions with me before, one of the things that I try to do is help define things in the industry, such as gamification. There's structural gamification, points and badges, and then there's content gamification, blending game mechanics with inside of content material inside of learning. This same type of thing, we have it in VR. We have VR, 360 VR, and we have 3D spatial VR. The 360 are just videos that you can spin yourself around, use with like the 360 cameras. And then you have 3D spatial VR, which is built in a gaming engine like Unity or Unreal or the Hero engine or any of those. And so I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about the difference between friendly and compatible, because those two need to be defined clearly in our industry, because our learning solution specialists here that specialize in sitting down with you, helping you solve your problem, and providing some type of basis for our team to really dive into what you need. They are being asked these things quite often, and we are consistently having to basically define that and determine that with them. And what I'm finding is it would be great if we came across as an industry to say this is either mobile compatible, built and tested from the ground up for each one of those devices, and really honed in on that, and it works flawlessly and perfectly in each one of those devices, or mobile friendly. We build it once, it may be responsive, but it may not work flawlessly in each one, and you're not tweaking each one of the aspects of it to do so. So, irregardless, you do have to do extensive testing. And I don't know about you guys, especially on the mobile side. What we have found is there are so many factors, not just an iPhone and an Android, but you also run into situations such as your bandwidth speed. And for many of you, I don't know how many nerdy JavaScript programmers I have, but if you have any loops or any of your JavaScript actual scripts fail due to bandwidth limitations, it won't trigger additional interactions or additional steps to happen. So you can end up in a situation where you really could end up hurting yourself depending on where you're launching that. So now that we've talked a little bit about definitions of mobile compatible and mobile friendly, what I'm going to talk about today is a awesome project that we got to do with the U.S. Department of Education over critical thinking. Okay, so Leslie actually is the project champion on this project. And what we did with Leslie is we really sat down and we had a detailed conversation with him and his team. Him and Dwayne really provided the information and the understanding of the need that we had for this. One of the biggest things that we had to do, and this was one of the major challenges, is this had to be 508 compliant across the board. So for any of you that haven't had to deal with that, here's the big thing. There is the ability in Captivate and in Storyline, regardless if it's 360 or Captivate 2019 or whatever you're using, to make it 508 compliant. Again, that's like checking the box to say, I'm going to make this SCORM compliant and just expecting, your quiz to work perfectly. What we ended up having to do is quite a few tweaks to ensure that it was working to be 508. So how many of you guys in the chat, how many of you guys have had to deal with any type of 508 compliancy or accessibility in the builds that you've done? Anybody? Catherine, Alan? All right, Rick. Also, Jacob. So one of the really cool things is we have an employee here at Designing Digitally named Victoria, and Victoria had an amazing experience when she was a quality assurance tester before she came on. And one of the things that she can tell you, and that we can tell you from experience, and probably everyone here, Alan, Rick, Jacob, Catherine, every single time that you build that, you got to run through it, and you got to run through the 508 testing, and you got to run it through the 508 compliancy testing each and every time you make tweaks, and making sure that you don't miss any of the accessibility material on each and every single one of the builds that you do. And that is, in our opinion, it takes about 30 to 35% more time than building it for it not to be 508 compliant. So if you're looking at it, we were looking at our workloads because all of the time frames are calculated here at Designing Digitally. And what we found is about 30 to 35% more time is invested by our production team just to do the 508 compliancy, and then come back and do any revisions once we find anything that's outside of compliant. So for us, the other hard part is 508 doesn't necessarily work for touch screens. So one of the things we still have to do is we had to do it on computers. We had to figure out ways to give out some of that material for the actual touchscreens and how to handle those. So there were different approaches taken, such as we would have the audio actually explain what was actually being seen on the screen so that they know what to push and where, things like that. As far as the critical thinking course, you guys should be aware that this was actually an instructor-led course. And what they found is this instructor-led course for them was something that was taking up a lot of time for their instructors, and they wanted to be able to get a sense of their audience had a kind of a split. Some that had already had information on critical thinking and had maybe prior training, but then you had a whole other subset that hadn't had any of this detailed information. So they were looking to optimize and really make this something to replace that classroom training. So what we ended up doing is, after coming up with the detailed analysis and sitting down with the Department of Education, one of the things that we did is we actually came up with quite a few different concepts over what we can do for this actual learning experience. The first thing that we were going to do is some of the gamified experiences on a mobile device and maybe make it a full-out game. And once we actually discussed with the audience, many of them stated, you know what, it would be great if we just had a real quick and dirty, not necessarily dirty, but a real quick reference piece that we could quickly get through that was mobile and allowed us to do it whenever. And then that piece would actually allow for us to get a pre-assessment of where these individuals were when they first started. And then it would give us the understanding of who needed to be trained. And then this mobile piece was used in the post performance months later that would then tell them how effective it was to use this tool. And so this tool actually got used in 3 different spots within inside of the actual training of these individuals to replace a classroom, a one-time classroom setting for critical thinking. But it's incorporated 3 different places, and depending on how well they do, they would end up with additional training, or they would be able to skip it and go move forward in their actual onboarding and their training efforts that they have at the DOE. Also, another really cool part is they wanted something that was completely responsive. So what we ended up doing is, this was built back when Captivate just came out with the responsive side of their software. So we actually developed this out in Captivate. And what we ended up doing is, after building it in Captivate, we used quite a bit of custom functions.
Hey.
And JavaScript. And so we were able to update and integrate using not just Captivate for the responsive, but also the ability to use additional JavaScript outside of that, and HTML5 outside of what Captivate was doing to give that mobile compatibility instead of mobile friendly. What's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Sorry about the technical drama. Literally, as we were starting, our wired network went down. And so I'm scrambling and literally running and grabbing my laptop and grabbing my phone. And with Luis, I'm like, oh, I'll tether to my phone and log in, and it works. So, hey,
awesome,
people.
Man. Hey, that's okay. I understand. Hey, Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I love that your shirt matches your headphones. I don't think you did that on purpose, man, but that's absolutely slick. I love it.
You have to coordinate.
Right? So first off, I want to say I'm sorry that you have to wear the tie all day long. Leslie and I have known each other for many years now, and Leslie and I had a conversation. I actually worked as a contractor for the Department of Education back when we had No Child Left Behind. And I was a contractor for the Board of Regents and the Department of Education to build games for kids to learn math, science, and engineering and technology, but we hadn't established STEM yet. And it was actually a 4-year project through the Board of Regents, and I loved it. So I got to fly all over the United States. We got to present, and quite a few of those games, which were Flash-based, actually ended up in quite a bit of the curriculum throughout the United States. So it was really a fun 4 years, man. I highly enjoyed it.
And I will say, granted, I didn't work with you then, but I have enjoyed working with you since we started working together. So, it's a good relationship.
Right. And I thank you so much for joining us today, man. What I'd like to do is, Leslie, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, tell them what you do there, talk a little bit about your division, and primarily let the audience get to know you a little bit.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, people. Sorry for the drama. My name is Leslie Lloyd. I've been with the Department of Education, specifically Federal Student Aid, for 5 years and about 2 weeks. So my background, I came from funnily enough, a broadcast design background. So, way back when I went to school, I was going to go work for Pixar, and graduated and started working, and my path kind of took me into doing a lot of video editing and broadcast design and that kind of stuff. And then as a result of all that, working in the DC area, of course, in addition to doing stuff for various commercial entities, I ended up doing a lot of work for government entities. And that kind of took me into the area of working for the government. And then they were like, oh, we need some of that video stuff for training. Can you do some of that video stuff you're doing? Because our audience taste is getting, more mature, and what used to pass for training, they were like, yeah, we need to do something more mature than that. And so that's what kind of brought me into the training world from a, multimedia design background, and kind of started me on the path of going from, just editing video or designing interfaces to doing full-on development and building out training from scratch in, your Captivates or your the various packages out there. Captivate's one of the ones I've used a lot, but I've used most of the major packages at one point or another. So that's kind of what got me to that point and led me to meeting Andrew.
That is too cool. And the reason why is we had this conversation before. My undergrad is graphic and interactive media, which is 3D, a lot of Maya, a lot of 3D Studio Max, many nights doing 3D rendering before we had like game engines to render. So we'd have what's called render wars. I don't know if you guys did, but over the weekend, you'd spend the night in the lab and take up as many computers as possible to render frame by frame animation. That was back in the day, man. I don't know. Did you guys do that kind of stuff?
We didn't refer to it as render wars. We referred to it as render wander. So you're like, okay, all the machines are going to be working. Hit the big render button and go wander around the office and pray nothing crashes. So it was a good way to be like, no, I'm working right now.
Yeah, see, this is the difference. Leslie actually, not knocking my school at all, love Bowling Green State University, but Leslie went to a school that must have had fast computers, because we would hit render on like 6 computers and we'd be there all weekend. And to the point where our professors, which they're awesome, and most of them are still there. So Bowling Green Computer Art Division, Digital Design Division, shout out. They actually allowed us to use the projector. So we brought our Super Nintendos and our Segas and our, at that point, I think Xbox had just come out. And we just projected it up on a wall and played Xbox while we waited on those things to render all weekend.
Yeah. Actually, when I taught in class, I did do that a couple times. Now I teach online, so
And who do you teach for?
I used to teach for the Art Institute of Washington, and now I teach for Southern New Hampshire University.
Yay! Very cool.
Yeah, I enjoy it a lot.
So tell us a little bit about, obviously we're going to talk about this project, but tell us what you've been working on lately. Like what kind of software, you don't have to tell us what you're working on lately, because I know how that works. You can get in trouble for that. But more or less, like what software, and the reason why is our industry, there are industry people in here, and there's always that fight between, are you using Captivate, are you using Storyline, are you using iSpring, Raptivity, Lectora, what are you using? And tell us what you're messing with.
Primarily right now, we're using Storyline and Captivate. Those are kind of the two mainstays for us. We were using Lectora for a little while, but that just kind of fell by the wayside. And I think it really came down to more comfort of the people doing the development. So, it's like, hey, if you like that and you can make it work, I don't care. Just make it work in the learning management system. So for us, we've just kind of defaulted to Captivate and Storyline. Those are the two mainstays that we use for most of that kind of work right now.
It's funny you said a key sentence that I hear quite often. It just needs to work in a learning management system. I don't care. I don't care. And no, you're right, my man. One of the funny things we do that here often is many people ask us that same question. We're like, well, we're gonna find out what works, and then we'll go from there. But people have their preferences. We have found nuances, and I'm sure you guys have too, nuances with both of those software products. Some are used really well for others. So in my opinion, both of them serve a pretty good purpose within inside of our industry.
Oh, absolutely. The reason they're so ubiquitous is like everybody uses one, the other, or some flavor of them to a certain extent.
So I know it's been a while, and I was kind of blabbing on about it at the beginning, but I wanted to know. Let's talk a little bit about the project, the critical thinking project that we did together.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, do you want me to just jump in, or do you have
hey, man,
questions you wanted addressed?
I already rapid fired while we were getting connected. So, you know what? I bet they would love to hear from you rather than me blabbing on, but I have a ton of questions that I can ask. And so you can kind of talk a little bit about it from your guys' side from the beginning and where it kind of manifested from and, you know, what took place and that kind of thing.
Okay, absolutely. All right, so with regards to this becoming a web-based training, it started life as instructor-led training, okay? It was an instructor-led training, and and yes, I will say many good things about Andrew and his team. One of the harsher requirements that we threw out there was, hey, this was like a 2-day instructor-led course. Can you whittle this down to like an hour of web-based training? Because that never happens. So
never.
Never. So that was one of the big things. It's an instructor-led course, but one of the big challenges we face at Department of Education, specifically federal student aid, in case anybody's wondering, Department of Education, yes, it's the huge government agency, and then within Department of Education is federal student aid. That's who I work, the single unit within Department of Education. And we literally function almost as our own like mini company. So we're a performance-based organization, basically meaning we got to be able to show that, hey, the stuff we're doing, we can show numbers to basically justify our existence. And that's why some of this training stuff becomes so important for us. But in terms of this specific training, we have many locations. Our headquarters is in DC, which is where most of our employees are, but we have 10 national locations. And so we need to be able to offer training to all of our employees as much as possible, in an equal basis, so people don't feel left out. So being able to pick up this 2-day training and take it around every single look. And this instructor-led form. We were took this training, 2 days of training, and the next day they go back to their day job and they're doing stuff. And 3 months down the road, they're like, oh, this is a good spot where that thing I learned 3 months ago would apply, but I don't remember it because I haven't looked at the materials in like 3 months.
Exactly.
So it was with all of those various things in mind. We came up with the idea and said, hey, we should offer this maybe in a kind of like a bullet pointed version, or I think bullet points is maybe selling it a little short. Kind of a Cliff Notes version, I think would be a better way to say it. How do we offer this in a Cliff Notes version where we can get it to everybody? And that's where the whole idea of web-based training came up, to say, hey, if we put it out there, we give them all the information, we can hit the highlights of this for the people in the region, and then for the people who've actually taken the course, it would still serve a purpose for them, because rather than them having to go back and sit through the entire process, they can still come in here and be like, oh yeah, that's the thing I remember. That's what I need. Let me run back through this training real quick, get that refresher, and be, be able to still utilize this information. And then of course, on top of everything else, we throw in the complication of, hey, we're trying to do this push or this transition into being more mobile friendly, because of course at the time nobody was doing mobile, or mobile was like the big new thing that people were still trying to wrap their minds around. And because at the time I didn't know Andrew, so I didn't even like him that much. So I was like, yeah, I'm just going to throw that complication at you too. Make it mobile friendly, make it good, make it work, go. So that was kind of how we came to them and said, hey, here's the parameters of this project. It needs to work in our learning management system. It needs to be 508 compliant, but it also needs to work both on the computer and on the mobile platform so that people can access this wherever they need to. So that, I think, is a very, very, very short version of how we ended up working together and where this project came from.
You're dead on, Leslie. And for the audience, so that you guys are aware, this was prior to exporting out to HTML5, or prior to the build it once and deploy it everywhere. So this was, I think I had stated it before, we built this in Captivate, but what we ended up doing is writing a separate JavaScript, separate HTML5, so that Leslie's team could still do the editing that they would like to do and got the raw files, but at the same time, they had a stronger structure of the output, or the exported output that you would get, than what you would normally get just straight out of Captivate. And the reason why, as many of you probably already know, if you do that publish, you could publish out now to HTML5, but you can always go through with your web team and make those tweaks and edits and updates without even touching Captivate if you really wanted to. You can reverse engineer and dissect out how they actually have it built that way. So it's not anything that you can't do, but at the time, like Leslie was stating, it was right at the beginning where people were saying, hey, we need to get out of Flash completely, and we need to do this HTML5 thing. And we all know the early adopters to new technology is usually the corporate side, followed by the government, or it's either the university side is doing the exploration, they see the viable use, and then the corporation and federal government will follow behind. But in all honesty, I was really happy to see Leslie say, hey, look, I want somebody to take on this challenge, so that we can pave the way for this, so that we can show everyone over here that this is doable, and it's not a deal breaker for us to be able to do this. And at the point where I know, and Leslie probably knows just from his experience, there was a lot of that going on with inside of not just the DOE, but across the federal government at that time, because not utilizing Flash anymore really put a big disruption in their business activities too. And they were very concerned about exporting outputs and security. And Leslie knows most all software has to go through the DoD approved list. And so it's not like Leslie can be like, oh crap, all right, let's go ahead and start using A-frame today, because they will, if it's not on the DoD approved list, he can't use it. So it makes it another tough situation that we were in, that we could have just built it straight HTML5 or something like that. But the hard part is that really wouldn't serve a purpose for Leslie to be able to do changes and updates and evolution and have the raw files. And for any of you that have worked with the government, it's a purchase order and there has to be something tangible behind it. So raw files are part of the purchase order. And so, for him, there has to be that tangible piece. And us giving him a bunch of outputted HTML5 files really would not have been sufficient enough for them to be able to do the edits, nor would it have been sufficient for the contract. So the integration of utilizing Captivate and writing that extra piece really did something for us that allowed us to build this to be very innovative at the time. And shout out to not just you, Leslie, but I do believe from the information that I was provided that you guys had Dwayne, your former boss, I believe. Is he still with you guys?
No, he's still with us. He's still with us.
All right. So tell Dwayne I said hi.
I will.
I do believe Renee was one of the subject matter experts with you on
Yes, she
this.
was.
So
Hmm.
Renee and Dwayne and you worked with our team, and for us it was Carly, one of our instructional designers, Sammy, a graphic designer, Brent, one of our programmers, Mike, one of our programmers, and Nick was the project manager at the time, and
Hmm.
so our now director of development. So you guys, I think, nerded it up quite a bit. And what
A
was
lot.
that like for you, man? What was that like for your team to work with ours?
Honestly, as I said, I will happily sing the praises of designing digitally, the entire team, any day, anywhere, anytime, because they were very responsive, really, really open to all the various curveballs we threw at them, and came back with just solid answers. Solid answers where it was like, okay, that'll work. We can do that. Let's make this happen. It did help that I came from the other side. I used to
Yeah.
be a contractor, so I understood a lot of the questions, issues, problems that would come up ahead of time, and I will say that helped. That helped me function as an intermediary between designing digitally and like my boss, who's like, "Look, ew, technology, get it away." Yeah, I'm not even lying. He'll be the first to admit he regularly comes to me and he's like, Leslie, make it do the stuff. And he does these kind of hand gestures. And up to this morning, he was like, Leslie, it's connecting to Wi-Fi instead of this. Should it be doing that? And I went in and looked at it and we got it fixed. So
I love
again,
it.
that was a part of my job to make sure that there was this understanding on both sides and try and minimize the drama and the crazy. But you guys were great for that. You know, you addressed all the questions. You came up with a really aggressive but logical timeline, and you were able to meet those milestones really well and keep us very informed in terms of the look, the feel, the tone. Keep us up to date in terms of just being able to give us something and say, here, test this out. Here's a piece of it. See if it works. See if it doesn't. Because the other big thing that again is so important, especially when working with the government, is this had to go into our learning management system. And learning management system integration is super important, but it can also be like pulling teeth at times. And I'm not, please, I'll be honest, it can be pulling teeth, especially since it's not just the learning management system, but it's our learning management system with 508 compliance. And then on top of that, when you're working with the government, it's different flavors of 508 compliance because
Yes.
different government agencies, while there is a standard book that says this is 508 compliance, different government agencies have different needs and wants depending upon how they function. A good example being, before I came to the Department of Education, I worked with the FAA.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I worked with the FAA. I was a government contractor working for the FAA, developing web-based training. And while
EICC.
while 508 was very, very important to them, there were certain aspects of certain trainings that they were a lot looser when it came to 508 compliance, because if you're developing training to train people on, signs on the runway, which is one of the things I had to do. We worked on this whole really immersive 3D thing. Well, you're not going to be quite as concerned with someone who's blind, because it's like, okay, it's a physical sign. You don't really expect somebody who's blind to be driving on a runway and have to be able to recognize signs on the runway and what that sign means. So it's that whole thing of, in that case, it's not saying, oh, forget blind people, we don't care. It's more a matter of, this would not be a position that someone that's blind would be doing. So
Yes.
do we need to make the 508 compliance in this case as important there. So it's that kind of thing where you're dealing with different flavors of 508 depending upon the government agency and depending upon their needs, combined with integrating that into a learning management system. And then, like I said, yeah, make it mobile too, just cause.
Hey, I want to say, first off, you can go ahead and send your address. I'll send you that check. Thanks for the plug. Just kidding, man. I did not put him up to this. I just want to put you all out there. Leslie is not sponsored by Designing Digitally in any way, shape, or form. But what I do want to say is thank you, man. That's very nice of you. The team here has a lot of experience looking at it from the outside and looking in. And one of the things that we constantly say is, I want you to put in an analogy of we've all been in a bad relationship and all your friends are like, oh man, don't get out of that thing as fast as you can. And we're like, what? What are you talking about? And you don't see it. And I'm not saying that every company's in a bad relationship, but what happens is when you're in the trenches, it's hard to see the entire horizon line. And so we were able to come in, take a look, assess what's happening, and then determine on exactly what is the need, like you're talking about. And it's funny you bring that up about the 508 compliancy. What you guys were doing is that at the FAA is that needs assessment for even the 508 side of things. And there's a lot of times where we don't even see that, and we kind of try to pin that down too, because oftentimes we have this thought process that if we think people are going to be doing the training for work while they're getting their groceries, it's not happening. And so one of the things we always ask is, can you run a report and tell us when people are taking this and at what times? And that gives you some of that answer. And it's funny you say about the FAA. One of my first jobs, or actually my third job out of college, was to work for GE, and all I did was the training for the turbine, the GE90, the turbine engine for the GE90. And oh man, AICC to the max, and then it would have to go into the Air Force. But I can Air Force's LMS and then GE's, and we were using Plateau at the time, and it was AICC. I'm making myself sound really old right now, but yeah, it was back in those days. And we were writing just, ironically at that time, we weren't even using Authorware. We were writing it in HTML and in JavaScript. So it's like the circle of life right now.
Yeah.
Basically, Flash born, died, and we're right back to HTML5 and JavaScript. So I think that's a really cool observation in our industry.
It is.
So,
it is.
I just saw your message. I can repeat as needed. Yeah, look at him. He's like, can you just keep adding zeros to that check, buddy?
I try.
So tell us, in regards to this project, tell us a little bit about the content and how that came about and what took place with the content and the information.
Well, the content itself, actually, the content was training that, or let me back up. It started as kind of a needs analysis thing. And you just mentioned needs analysis. That's where it started. It was literally a matter of, I kind of got shanghaied into being involved in the needs analysis process. Because normally I'm not.
Funny how that works.
Exactly. Again, mad respect to all my ISDs out there. I work with some of the best, and one of the ISDs I work with, she's like, hey, can you come help me take notes on this one thing? And it ended up being me involved in the needs analysis process for the better part of a month. Yeah. And we were going around meeting with the different business units or operating groups, as they're referred to now, and really meeting with them from the top down, starting with the person in charge, and then their subordinate, and then managers, and then even down to the employee level with certain groups, to really get a feel for where they felt there were some issues or some holes in terms of just training or stuff they needed to do, or things they could do better. Based on that, one of the things that came up was critical thinking, or that's how we termed it. And how or what that really took the form of was identifying that there were people who were realizing that there's stuff being elevated to management or beyond, or upper management, that maybe if they were breaking it down a little bit or being a little more critical in their thinking, they would be able to make a better determination of, okay, is this something I need to elevate to my manager, or is this something I need to elevate to somebody else? Or maybe I just need to dig a little bit deeper and figure this process out so that when I do elevate it to my manager, rather than saying, here's this problem, it's, okay, here's the issue, but here are the few things that I need your input on. So that's kind of, that was the genesis of the kernel that started the development of this course. From that, we went to a specific group who actually developed the course, because we do have our own ISDs. They have me to do web-based development, but again, I think right now we're about 1,400 people. So the two ISDs and me, we're not doing training development for all 1,400 people. A little bit of a heavy lift. So that's where we do farm out projects like this. And so we had farmed this out. We had a group that developed, this is instructor-led training, or they actually had something in place that they were able to very easily adapt. Yeah. And as a part of that process, they were like, we're going to adapt it for you guys so it's tailored to your specific group or your business unit. And as a part of that, we were given the content when it was done, and they had presented it and gone through it. And so that's what allowed us to have this really, really good content to then turn around and say, oh, well, you guys don't do web-based training, but these designing digitally people, they do that, and they look like they know what they're doing. So that's how we were able to come to them with pretty well-developed content, but it still required the heavy lift of saying, okay, this was done in an ILT format. How do we take this and adapt this to a web-based training format? So that's where we came in with a lot of good content, but still we're like, all right, take this dictionary and make it a pamphlet.
You know, it's funny, you also made a comment. One of the challenges that we had is that instructor-led training was extremely solid. The other organization, which we partner with organizations like that all the time that focus on instructor-led or webinars that would like to convert that. And it's not just a quick conversion of, you know, this meeting. And what we ended up doing is having all of this instructor-led training material. And like you said, all right, so this is a very large amount of content. Yeah, they're only going to be able to look at this for an hour. So we had to simplify, we had to condense, we had to allow them to dig deeper if they would like. And it comes back to one of those things that we talked about before. Rather than just pushing data to them, they were able to get the absolute what they needed, but then they could pull additional resources and tools and material out of that particular subject, rather than just getting that presentation of information and being done and over with. And so we tried as much as we could to condense that large amount of instructor-led training into something that they would use quite often. And I love this stuff because I don't know about you guys, but I still do SWOT analysis all the time. And so I do it constantly here for work, and I can tell you they work very, very well. And at least for me, I loved, I was one of the testers for this, because if you are the learning solution specialist, you were required to be a tester here. Because if you were the one with the main point of contact that initiated this project, you should be on the testing side of this. So for me, it was great because I got to really work on my own critical thinking skills while being a tester on this. So it reiterated that I hate doing SWOT analysis, but it also told me how to do it effectively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I see Craig's here. Craig's in the Virginia area. I do
okay.
believe. Yeah.
Hey neighbor. Hey neighbor.
Hey. So what tell me a little bit about, because like you said, this was deployed in your learning management system. Tell us a little bit about what's taken place since you know, this is rolled out, and what at all, if you had any information for that material.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I lost your audio for just a second.
Yeah, tell us, now that we've completed this, we've rolled it out, it's been out for a while. what type of feedback and what have you heard, and kind of what, if any, results have you been able to get from this so far?
Okay. Well, in terms of feedback's been really good. It's pretty much all been positive. I think the three times I've had people who've come back with negative feedback, I dug a little bit deeper, and all three times it was a matter of, oh, the network wasn't working well that day, so it was really slow and buggy. I'm like, okay, then that's not the course. That's the network. Um, so, well, I tend to be, a little protective. I'm like, hey, I
Oh,
helped develop this thing. It's like, if it's bad, I want to know, but good
yeah.
Lord. So, yeah, I mean, we've had pretty good usage of it. Of course, it's always a challenge when you have something like this that's not mandatory training, it's
Yep.
optional. So one of the ways we make sure that it's seen pretty good usage is to regularly advertise it. We have a specific format we send out, and this is one of the
Yes.
trainings that at least, I'd say 4, 5, maybe 6 times a year, I'll just shoot an email out saying, hey, have you taken, or hey, are you aware of, just to put it back in front of people so they're aware of it. And that's gotten us pretty good continual usage of this training. And I have had people come back in the same way that you were picking stuff out, and they're like, yeah, that SWOT analysis, I actually use that
Yeah.
because, I regularly meet with people and discuss various forms of training and what they may need. So this is one of the ones that has regularly come up where people are saying, hey, you know what, I actually really like that training. That was pretty cool. I do use that. And I've had a couple people say, I was surprised that it worked so well on my tablet because,
Oh,
because we have a decent part of our workforce that gets to work, gets to telework.
yeah.
So a lot of times when they do have to do training, they'll save it for a telework day because then you can actually get through the training uninterrupted. I speak from experience, almost without fail. If the training is over 10 minutes long, at some point I'm going to get a phone call, get an email, somebody's going to swing by my desk, and the training gets interrupted.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've had people say to me, they're like, yeah, I saw a thing and it said it was mobile friendly, and I tested it out in mobile and it actually worked. And they're looking at me like, I did not think it would.
You invented fire.
Well, we said, all right. So it's worked really well. We've been very, very pleased. And again, he did not pay me to say this, but I'm gonna blow you guys up one more time. One of the things that really, really, really ended up working well, the fact that we developed this and you made it Java and HTML5 and all that good stuff. We switched learning management systems. So we were on
Yep.
Plateau, and we shifted to Taro, which is built on a Moodle backbone, and
Yep.
we were able to take it from that, drop it into the new one, and it worked. And that was
Boom.
one. I remember us discussing that, but at the time it was still like, I think it was like 18 months out before we were coming to it. But that was one of the reasons I think I had pushed my boss and everybody else so hard to say, if we're doing this, it needs to be HTML5 so that we're future proofing it. And that was borne out by the fact that we were able to, this was literally one of the, I think when we were first testing our LMS, this was one of the 3 that I was like, here, take these 3 courses, drop them in there, test it, let me know if it works. And
Yeah.
we were able to drop the sucker in there, and it worked almost seamlessly. I think there were 1 or 2 things we had to go in and play around with in terms of our LMS settings.
Yeah.
And once we figured that out, this worked perfectly in our new LMS. So that was one of those times where I got a bunch of kudos, and I didn't share them with Andrew. And then I was like, yeah, that was all me. I did that.
You take that. You take that. You take that. That's your win. And everybody here, you just keep that quiet. Dwayne doesn't need to know that. Win. Also, what's funny about that is I know for a fact that you guys had that conversation, and we have partnering Designing Digitally doesn't want to be in the develop the LMS space. We want to develop out innovative learning experiences that go into the learning management systems. So we have partnering agreements with all of those major learning management systems. So we actually have sandboxes of those. So it was cool because what they did is they ran it through the sandbox to make sure that it would work with that, with Totara, and we didn't have any problems at all. And we also knew it was going in your plateau. So they were able to test your plateau, but they also tested it to make sure at that time. And we knew it was going to be longer, but we knew that it was working fundamentally on both of them before we sent it. And we were hoping for that, but you never know. And I always think of it this way. You made a comment before about SCORM being finicky. Here's the thing that is quite interesting in our world. You and I both speak English, but the way that I put together my sentence structure is different than the way that you put your sentence structure together. There are words that I use all the time, like, and this isn't unprofessional, it's just the truth. If somebody tells me good news here at the office, I go sexy. I say it's sexy, and it's never anything that would be actually sexy. It's just off, and everyone's like, what? And it's just my immediate response to, hey, I like that. And for me, it's just a particular word that I use. And for you, you probably don't do that. And so, and if you did, Dwayne's probably looking at you like, what did you just say? And but everyone here is used to me doing that. They don't think anything of it. But that's the same way when we program and when we develop, even with SCORM. Especially when we were doing it in Flash and you could do it in Animate and you're writing your own SCORM, the programming structure and the way that you program to send that command or to get from the temporary setting or the oh god, what is that? Suspend data. Yep, boom. From getting data from the suspend data from the LMS and stuff like that, you can write it that script as many different ways as you want, as long as you're using those variables to pull that data in. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, since it's SCORM, it's going to work perfectly. No, SCORM is just the framework and structure of the variables in which you can only use to shove that stuff back and forth. So you can write that code to do a whole bunch of stuff. It doesn't mean it's actually going to function correctly in the LMSs. And we've seen that across the board because every LMS, the programmers that wrote them are not the same programmers. They don't have the same sentence structures. They don't have the same programming thought processes. So a lot of times it may be passing the SCORM test cloud, but it might not import into Moodle, and it imports into Litmus perfectly fine. So it's all about how that programmer has developed that out and ensuring that it's actually communicating that. And a lot of times people get frustrated about that in our industry, but let's be real, it's about the way that they program those sentence structures. Those variables are in there, they're just not communicating correctly. Flash. Yeah, right. I will say this. We use Adobe Animate here a lot because if you have the prior experience in Flash, believe it or not, you can write in JavaScript now. You can't even export out a Swift file. You can only export out an HTML5 out of Animate. So don't write off Animate, everybody. That thing can still be used especially for your prior Flash developers. That thing should be jumping right back in that bad boy.
No. I agree with you. I think Adobe has done a really, really good job of repositioning Flash. By saying, all right, look, we're going to stop calling it Flash. We're going to give it a new name. We're going to tighten up the usage of it and refocus it a little bit. I think they've done an excellent job of saying, all right, look, let's stop relying on our own, on our own scripting language and all that. Let's really embrace what the internet wants and still utilize all the great animation stuff that you can do in there and just set it up so it works best with your HTML5s or your JavaScripts or whatever. So I think Adobe I give them a lot of respect for recognizing it and saying, all right, look, it's not working. We need to redo this, but let's not completely abandon what was and still is a very, very good, very viable program. So
you're dead on. You're dead on. Now Adobe better pay us both.
Yeah. I'll take that Adobe money.
Articulate pretty badass too. I'm just gonna put that out there. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
But love those guys over there too. Hey, I just saw that we are getting the wrapped up notification. I do want to say to everybody that joined us today, thank you so much for spending your time and your hour with Leslie and I. And Leslie, thank you so much for joining
Absolutely.
us. Please, I missed that place, so walk around and send me some pictures. I'm sure everything is still eggshell white, but
Completely.
completely, yep. And and if you could let me know if we can do anything to collaborate or help out in any other way. And I just want to say thank you to everybody. Again, my name's Andrew from Designing Digitally. We have Leslie from the Department of Education, and we just want to say until we speak again, stay creative.
Have a good one, people. It's been a pleasure.